That's going to end in a couple seconds. I'd like to bring the general plan working group meeting to order for Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. Can we have roll call, please?
Chairman Walt Stanish.
Here.
Vice Chair Lisa Hetchman.
Here.
Edwin Okamura, absent. Tom Donnelly,
Here.
Emmett Holtzlander,
Here.
Judith Adamson. Art Durden,
Here. Rick
Dolk,
Here.
Lisa Duke. Here.
Can you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone that would like to speak on anything, please do so. We don't have anybody here. Anybody online?
There is no one online.
Okay, I'll close public comment. Action items, approval of the June 1st, 2023 minutes. Do anybody have any questions first? And then if not, then do we have a motion to approve? Second. Lisa, okay. Can we have a roll, please?
Chairman Walt Stanish,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lisa Hetchman,
Yes.
Tom Donnelly,
Here. Yes.
Emmett Holtzlander,
Yes.
Judith Adamson, Art Durden.
Yes.
Okay.
And just to clarify, Lisa, you seconded.
All right, we're on discussion items. Number 4, we're going on to 4.1 preliminary draft of public facilities and services element. Oh, you're up.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Here we are at our 17th General Plan Working Group meeting. Time has flown. This evening, we will mainly be talking about the public facilities and services element. We could go ahead and next slide. We are going to, or we did share with you a couple of formatted elements. And so we're looking for just general thoughts about those elements. We'll talk a little bit more about the expectation for review now and then subsequent review as well. And then at the end, we'll go over our schedule for the next few meetings. So things are going to be ramping up here. Next slide. Oh, this is perfect. That's great. So we're looking at public facilities and services element. On the face, it might seem rather dry, but this is really everything the city does to run a community. All the services from fire and police, running wastewater treatment, collecting the garbage. We have a little bit of interface with schools. We have a whole bunch of facilities and services that are provided, and it really is the core function of the city to deliver these to the community. So incredibly important. That's reflected in this is a fairly complex element. We touched a lot of departments as we went through developing the public facilities and services element, got a lot of input from other agencies as well as other departments. And so we're going to go through a lot of slides this evening to just touch on all the goals, policies, and programs. And we'll walk through those. Nick and I will kind of tag team back and forth. And our hope is that as we look at each block, 2, 3 programs or policies, we'll review those and take any comments, and then we'll move along. We'll just work through this. Thank you to Judith and to Lisa for providing comments up front on the Word version. So we do have those. So you don't have to reiterate those now in this review. Lisa, there was a couple of things that there was a lot of comments that you provided that were editorial, which was all great, really easy. There's a few things that we're going to have to do a little bit of research on. Judith, all of your comments really appreciated and all will be incorporated in. So if anything comes up that you haven't already commented on, please jump in, but you don't have to backtrack on those materials. Great, next slide. So we're going to start out with the goals here. We think these 4 goals encompass what the city's obligation, commitment to the community is. Provide high quality and reliable facilities and services. So make sure that the quality of the services and facilities meet the city's needs, the community's needs. Be cost effective. These services represent the biggest expenditures of the city, and delivering them in a cost-effective manner is critical because we want to provide everything we can to the community. Ensure services will be adequate at build out of the general plan. So now we're talking about, we're fine today, but will we be okay in 23 years, 22 years at general plan build out? And then we want to work with our related agencies, whether that's a school district, a county, a private company that does waste hauling. We just want to coordinate with every agency that's helping us to take care of the community. So we think those 4 goals encompass public facilities and services goals. Is there anything you see that we've missed? Sir?
I don't think this community could function without our nonprofits and our volunteers, so I think that might need to be incorporated in there as well. They're a vital part and they do a lot for the community that the city can't sometimes or isn't able to do.
Got it. And certainly helps us do more than we could otherwise. Great. So we'll be adding an additional goal related to nonprofits and volunteers. Any other items?
I just had a comment. On the first goal, it's to provide high quality in facilities. I don't know what people's definition of high quality, but just the nature of, we're a small community. I don't know if I call any of our facilities high quality. I don't know if I'm too critical, but providing quality may be a little bit more broader. I don't know if I'm parsing that too much, but.
You want to lower the bars, which.
Yeah, I don't know. High quality could mean a lot. I don't, and I'm anxious to hear anybody else.
My opinion is shoot for the stars. If you set a high goal, you may not get there, but it's a high goal that you're reaching to attain. If you set a mediocre goal, it's much easier to get to.
Provide better
Yeah.
So
I'm just, that was.
it's an interesting concept and one maybe we should keep an eye on as we're talking about policies and programs.
Sure.
And in a world of limited resources, I think, there's something to be said for providing all of the services at a reasonable level versus.
Well,
So we'll,
I personal experience worked for a large corporation. And when I went to work for them, this is multinational, their stated goal was, we're going to be middle of the road because it costs too much to be number one. They were middle of the road and always people just, yeah, they're okay.
okay. so-
And then a chairman of the board came in and said, not acceptable. We are going to be number one in every field that we touch. And it doesn't cost a whole lot more to do that. But when it filters down through the organization and everybody is focused on doing the best job they can do, you get a whole lot better performance.
Sounds like we'll leave high quality. Okay. All right.
Well,
Next slide.
Wait, sorry, can I add
sorry.
something then to Rick's
Yeah.
point? Because then when you look at goal 3, they will be adequate. So who's determined, there's an adequate, what's the adequacy? Like that everybody gets to have the sort of access that we're experiencing now, but it sounds like it's not necessarily of the highest quality. So can we get there maybe pointing some of that out to leave Art's point alone in goal 1, and maybe we approach it through, well, what does adequate mean in goal 3?
Or ensure public facilities and services will meet the needs, service needs of the community.
I thought just will serve the community.
Yes. Adequate, you're lowering the bar.
Okay, so just strike be adequate too.
Yes.
Or will well serve the community, something like that, so it's kind of superlative.
Mhm.
Got it. All right. Anything else? Great, good stuff. We're gonna tag team back and forth, so Nick will take care of the next couple of slides and we'll go back and forth. Nick, you're up.
Thanks, Paul. Good evening, everybody. So here are the policies to help implement the goals that we just stated. The first policy is maintaining roadways to allow for the safe travel of all vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists, and emphasizing, proper maintenance to help reduce future costs associated with roadways. Second policy is maintaining and constructing new sidewalk facilities to encourage pedestrian movement and safe facilities for pedestrians to travel in the city. And the third policy is regarding new development projects and having construction of full frontage improvements as a part of those, including sidewalks, landscaping, and lighting within the public right-of-way and along all project road frontages.
So just a little bit of color commentary on the first one. It is, it's really important to take care of what you have because maintaining a road is a whole lot cheaper than reconstructing a road. So that's why we added that emphasis on maintenance. And then on the third bullet, that's a policy that really helps planning staff out and makes clear what the expectation is. So when a developer comes in, no, you do have to put the frontage in. And so this is a case where a policy becomes really important in the review of development projects. So with those additional comments, any input?
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here. I missed the last meeting, but I had sent in something and one of the comments I sent in had to do with golf carts. Golf carts are a interesting mode of transportation. And my suggestion is we look at pathways from Liberty, Trilogy, Bram Ranch, Riverwalk, all of those outlying areas that would incorporate not only bicyclists, skateboarders, but also golf carts. Let's help the people in the outlying areas move to and from the downtown core. You can have pathways that are not on the street, and you can also authorize, you can pass city ordinances. So street legal is putting a bumper in the front and the back and headlights and taillights. And a license plate, yeah, so.
So there's communities such as Lincoln as also has a lot of retirement and golf course communities, and it's actually a part of their transportation network. And we do have the 10-foot wide path that is on Airport Road at Trilogy, and that will extend down towards the business park. And so we're working on bringing that system in. I think it will be a great discussion in circulation because we will be taking that up. And I think next meeting, we'll talk about that at the end of the sequence. But if we're going to layer in routes that would allow Liberty Trilogy residents to get downtown, then that does have to get planned in. So maybe we can bring that up in the circulation discussion.
That's fine.
Are the people in Trilogy trying to escape? Is that what you're trying to do?
I'm trying to encourage them to come down and enjoy our downtown core area.
And, if
And if you don't, if you imagine yourself having to fight Highway 12 traffic and everything, it's much easier to just stay in Trilogy or Liberty and complain about the fact that you can't ever get downtown. Let's give them another way that you can get downtown that they don't have to fight the Highway 12 traffic.
I would guess the people in Liberty don't have many, if any, golf carts. It's probably just mostly Trilogy.
Mostly
folks.
Trilogy,
Yeah.
but
no,
hey.
it's good.
I mean, there's a lot of other communities around this country where golf carts are often used instead of as way of local transportation.
Somerset and Brentwood, you can go from their complex over to the Safeway across the street. Yeah.
So we'll bring this to Fair and Peer's attention tomorrow and make sure they're aware that we want to see that layered in within the overall circulation network and how that will work. And I think one thing that will be key to make that work is some kind of grade separated crossing of Highway 12. Because if you can't take the Highway 12 problem out of the equation, you haven't really solved the issue. So.
So on that point, is it important then to have something that underlines trails, if for just for a pedestrian type thing is what I was thinking? If it's something that we want the public to continue to support. So I'm thinking the bridge to beach type trail, should there be that type of item, or is that okay only to have it then in the open resources? And
We're actually covering it both in Parks and Recreation and in mobility and circulation. So I think we have, already a couple areas where we can be discussing it. So we're covered. Okay, other thoughts on these first three policies? Okay, next slide. Nick?
Okay, the fourth policy is decommissioning the beach wastewater treatment plant facility and completing all the improvements necessary for the plant to serve the entire city through at least 2045. And then also requiring on-site stormwater management system design and lid techniques per the city to improve runoff of water and to improve water quality in the city over the future and runoff volume as well.
So a wastewater treatment policy and a stormwater policy here. Any thoughts on these?
where the city depends upon the wells, is it worth putting another comment in here and just say, have a focus on groundwater recharge? I mean, I get that that's what decreasing runoff volume sort of does, but.
Does to some extent. My understanding is we have very ample underground water resources. And that we, as I understand, it's been reported to me, I haven't part of the discussions, but the council has been looking at whether we want to go more aggressively in groundwater recharge, and we're not actually very well suited due to some of the soil conditions that we have in Rio Vista. So I'm not sure that that's going to be a particularly large emphasis. Well, what we do absolutely want to do is make sure that the quality of the water that is eventually running off as stormwater is filtered on site.
So to kind of piggyback what Lisa just said, should we also include maybe the purple pipe that's eventually going to be installed? Because that's going to head out to Trilogy to water the golf course.
Yeah, let's look for that as we discuss the water policies
Okay.
and the water programs, but absolutely, if we haven't covered purple pipe yet, we need to have it as a general plan policy and supported by program. So let's look for that in the water sections. Anything else on these? Right, next one. Let's see. The city shall ensure new growth pays for the facilities and services it requires. So this is that concept that as new development comes in, it should pay for itself, whatever that means, through infrastructure expansion, and as well as operational and maintenance costs. Second policy, the CIP, the Capital Improvements Program, shall include expansion of facilities to meet increasing demand. So we have a capital facilities program that says these are the things we're going to build, this is what they're going to cost, and this is how we're going to fund them. So we want that to be forward thinking and looking towards building facilities for future development capacity. CFDs, common financing mechanism used on development projects. Developers certainly like to use CFDs to pay for some of the costs of improvements that they would otherwise have to bear, because it takes it out of their immediate costs and transfers it to future property owners. And that's how development gets done in California. CFDs are a very common component. What we're saying here is that's fine, but we want to save some of that capacity on CFDs for city projects. So you don't get to just build your own streets. We want to make sure that some of this goes to bigger city projects. So that's the third policy about CFDs. Any thoughts, comments on these three policies?
Something like that could be used for public safety building.
Yeah, CFDs have broad application, so but it is, understand it's indebtedness that you're placing upon the future homeowners. So. Yep. To the extent that those homeowners are served by the future public safety facility, that's appropriate.
In the second sentence in the first policy, can we change adequate to appropriate?
Seconds. Yes, so the city shall ensure appropriate funding. So that is PSF 6. Every time you bring this up, I reflect back to a friend of mine who jokingly said, I think of myself as adequate Hoffman. I don't want to be great. I just want to be good. And Craig was more than adequate. So, all right, next. slide.
Hold on a second on
Sure.
PSF 8.
Yes,
It's saying the CFDs shall be utilized to fund required city infrastructure. Is required the right word? Necessary? I mean, who decides what's required?
the city does,
Yeah. Okay.
but it is obviously subjective. But that would be, we would, through our CIP planning, through our wastewater and water master plans, through all of those studies that we prepare and adopt, we determine what's required.
Okay.
Anything else on these three? Okay, next slide. Number 9, give high priority in capital improvement programming to funding rehabilitation and replacement of critical infrastructure that's reached the end of its useful life or capacity constraints. So this gets back to, we're not just thinking about building new facilities for new growth. We have to make sure that the facilities that are already serving the community are maintained. And so part of our CIP has to be looking at that. Number 10, ensure the police services are efficient and responsive to meeting the public safety priorities of the community. Pretty straightforward. Just we want our police in a position to effectively serve the community. 11, maintain emergency response and fire prevention services at levels that minimize risk of injury and loss of property. So we do have standards that we seek to achieve both on law enforcement and fire prevention. And so we're just establishing the importance of that with these policies. Any comments on 9, 10, or 11?
On 9, I have a comment there. I'm thinking we should say replacement of critical infrastructure that is approaching or has reached the end of its useful life. Let's not wait until it's broken.
Great observation. Great. Any other items jump out? Okay, next slide, Nick.
Okay, so policy PSF 12, construct facilities and maintain equipment to provide effective and responsive police and fire protection in the city. Establish and maintain mutual aid agreements that provide supplemental aid from partnering law enforcement and fire agencies. So just having that coordination happening to help the city over the years. And then maintaining and expanding volunteer and community-based police programs as a strategy to enhance public safety in a cost-effective manner.
Just, while we spoke in the last, I think, 10 and 11 about providing the service, 12 is actually about the facilities. And I think anybody who's knowledgeable of the police station knows that the days are numbered that we're going to be able to rely upon that facility. So somewhere in the life of this general plan, we will need to think about a permanent police station. And then the question of additional fire station, police doesn't really care where their cars stay at night or where they base out of. One station can serve an entire community. There is a question about whether one fire station can serve an entire community. So there's a debate that will have to occur about what facilities are going to be needed and where should they go. So that's what number 12 is speaking to. Thoughts, comments, ways to improve?
Often police services, people will go, the public will go to get a report. And so, yes, we don't need a grand building to house a small workforce that would be there, but it should be relatively accessible to the public.
Let's look for the program regarding police, because I think you'll see something come up in a little bit about what we're going to do about police and make sure we get that kind of community visibility. Because typically there's a lot more than just getting a report. There's permits, there's licenses, there's things that people need to do at a police station. Okay.
Can I ask a question too? And maybe we're not there or we already passed it, but when you look at police or fire protection, the other element is health care. I mean, it's medical service. We don't have a healthcare facility. I don't know if we're going to say anything about that, but it's also paramedic service as well.
Yeah, fire's 90% medical.
Right.
They don't put out a lot of fires. They respond to a
Right.
lot of medical
Right,
emergencies.
but I just didn't know if we need to spell that out.
So maybe instead of fire, say emergency services.
Maybe fire and emergency.
Well, if you really wanted to, you could either require that every fire person be paramedic. A lot of departments have gone on that route. That everybody was on the engine.
I think in our deployment, we always have an EMT. So there's always an EMT rolling out. Maybe not everybody is.
Right, but the emergency medical technique.
Got it.
Another level.
Okay. So I think the emphasis on it's more than just responding to fires. How best can we say that? Fire protection and emergency,
Medical, emergency.
fire protection and medical emergency. Yeah. Okay, so that's number 12.
And
Okay.
do we, and back to the other point, I mean, do we put anything, because we've tried encouraging healthcare providers to do things here. I don't know if we want to include that statement on that. We don't have to, it is something we've been looking at.
Probably not in this element, but I think somewhere it probably fits best in land use. Maybe it has a place in economic development even. So,
Did you add that language then for 13 also? Law enforcement, fire, and emergency agency.
yeah, we'll get in both. And the desire to attract medical providers it seems universal in everything but large cities, even medium-sized cities. They want a hospital. We'd be happy just having additional services, but it's always this, we really want it in our town versus having to go for an ambulance ride somewhere else.
Paul, on number 14, it says maintain and expand volunteer and community-based policing programs. What did you have in mind? I mean, what was the thought behind that? And because I don't really, other than a few volunteers at the fire department and the police department, was there something bigger than that you had in mind? Yeah, I don't know.
It can be neighborhood watch. It can be an extension of code enforcement. It can, I mean, we really can't have volunteers going on active calls. So there are certainly edges of what they can do. We do have, I think, some volunteers at the police department already.
Mhm.
So I suspect you all are more familiar with exactly how volunteers are helping these departments, but just the general thought process is we've got folks who want to give to the community and we have needs. So it kind of like the larger statement at the beginning. But maybe this is worded properly. Maybe it's too narrow band. Not.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if policing is too specific. Because you're right, you're not gonna have a volunteer. In the days of having the volunteer police officer out there, it's long gone.
Yeah.
Everybody has to be. But you could have, if you said public safety, and you can put, especially in times of emergency where you are overwhelmed, you can have groups that are trained to respond in public safety situations, to provide first aid, to provide the basic care of reaching out to the community that is overwhelmed for a short period of time.
So,
Policing work is.
Yeah.
how about if we strike that and strike policing programs and go to public safety? We're not going to say, and maybe it's just strike policing programs as a strategy.
The fire department has a CERT program that is not active right now, but it's certainly a well-defined program of training volunteers to respond. Trilogy has had the emergency action committee for long as I've been. The emergency action committee is first aid trained and respond in times of emergency. Because especially in a small town like we have, your professional forces could be overwhelmed rather quickly with community-wide emergency. And to have people that are trained to do at least some office maintenance.
I think just eliminating the word policing makes it work.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's because then we go on to say enhance public safety. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll work. Okay. Anything else? Okay, next slide. Is this yours, Nick?
Yeah, I'll take this one again. So the 15th policy is the city shall support the efforts of the River Delta Unified School District to obtain adequate funding for new school facilities. And that can also include rehabbing facilities as well. The city shall encourage joint use of facilities and coordinated park and recreation programs within the River Delta Unified School District. And the city shall support the River Delta Unified School District's efforts to identify appropriate locations for future schools.
These programs were given a fair amount of consideration. We want to recognize how important public education and the schools in Rio Vista are, but we don't actually provide public education or schools. We don't pay for them. So these are all just suggesting ways that we could support the mission of the district through the activities that we do. So is this going far enough? Is this going too far? It's kind of a fine line in that the school district has its own elected body, governors. It has its own funding sources. It has its own mission. So how far do we go here?
It seems very vague language, the city shall support. And what does that look like?
That might look like imposing requirements on developers in the project review process. It might look like writing letters of endorsement for grant applications. It might, could be letters to the legislature. There's various ways short of we're going to pay for. I think it's a little bit
I think
better.
when you have shall and assist, I think you need to leave it at support because you're two independent elected bodies.
The council's been having the 2-on-2, and I really like that idea because there's so many facilities that the city has and or the school district has that could be shared by good coordination between the city.
We've just recently restarted working on a new joint use because our old one, I think, expired in 2016, I think it was. So, yeah, that's appropriate.
Okay, and any adjustments here? How are we doing?
First sentence, just appropriate funding to obtain appropriate funding, not adequate funding.
Okay. And that's PSF 15.
And I don't know if in 17, it's not just if the numbers are going to increase, both, and I made a note of this in my input, both Riverview and the high school used to have more buildings than they currently do. So if the numbers are going to go up, there is the opportunity to support the River Delta Unified School District in deciding on permits, et cetera, to allow them to expand within their current footprints to handle an increased number, not just for new sites.
And the district certainly can do that, and they wouldn't ask our permission. They would go through a process with the state architect, and that's really, we don't even say grace over their buildings.
Fair.
I think that increased number is kind of false in a sense because you've got kids in the school right now that are eventually going to graduate out. So they'll be gone. And if we get new kids coming in the new developments, they'll kind of fill that space. So I don't know if our schools are really going to increase number of students all that much. I mean, it's kind of like a sliding scale in a way, because once these guys term out and those new houses get built in, those students are gone, graduated. And so there's these empty seats. So I mean, it's kind of like a tit for tat there.
My experience is that I moved into a neighborhood 26 years ago, and it was brand new. And just about everybody had kids, or in the next 5 years would have kids. And there was rugrats everywhere. And then we went through a period where all of those kids had left. And now we're in a period where families are buying into the neighborhood again. So now that there does seem to be, in the first flush of development, a higher family count, but it does turn over. So I would think that the households in Rio Vista ones that are not age restricted, will have families move in, new families will move in. So that'll be turning over. I hope the numbers are a bit inflated because they're a bit frightening. But those are kind of normal generation factors that we'll use. They're not particularly high. And this district may need to point more students from the other communities into the high school at least, because it already receives the middle school and the high school are already receiving from Ileton. I don't know if we'll receive more than that, so. It's, the district has a challenge ahead of itself. So no other changes on 15, 16, 17? Okay, next slide. We're on to the programs. Is this me, Nick?
Sure, that'll be you.
Okay, I'm kind of losing track here. Conduct an analysis to determine the need for an additional fire station, to serve the community under 2045 build out, consider size and configuration of the station, staffing required, and optimal location. I've heard we absolutely need another fire station. I've heard we don't need another fire station. I've heard we need a small fire station, but not a big one. So I've heard, just as an observer, lots of different opinions. I don't know if anybody's really got it figured out yet, but it seems likely that at least some satellite facility will be appropriate, but that's for other folks to figure out.
It seems to me when Rio Vista first was established that the fire station where it's at served the community where it was. Now it's grown out and the nucleus of the population has moved further away. We may only need one fire station, but it's the location is where it should be, and maybe it should be closer to the nucleus of the population. Just my opinion, but
Yeah, so that maybe one station is enough on location, maybe this station, and candidly, by far, most of the response to Trilogy and Liberty is going to be emergency medical. So, please don't tell the fire chief I said this, but do you really need a ladder truck to go to somebody who's had a trip and fall? So are there other ways?
it's still
The-
kind of up in the air, actually.
So
The-
I don't think it's for this group to debate.
Right.
We'll need to have the experts who can understand how to efficiently serve and back to that cost effective. Are we trying to stand up 3 crews out of a station so we can have 24/7 coverage? Do we want fire suppression as well as emergency response? Those are complex questions that are, all we're saying is we really need to figure this out.
So with fire, I see it more as a personnel issue than a station issue. Because if you build a second station, you've got to put personnel there to staff it. So it's the staffing that should drive it. And this particular program we seem to be driving it by where should we build a second station? And you really have to consider how the staffing levels are going to be. Because again, to staff 2 stations is going to be a difficult process with the manpower that we have.
And that's
Our-
kind of what I said about maybe moving the station. And if we move the station, then we have an empty fire station down here. It could be a police station. I mean, just a thought.
And if we move the station out there, how do we get them downtown and in a timely fashion?
Well, I mean, it seems like most of the calls are out that way anyway. So I mean, if anybody should have the brunt of the time as far as too much time to be able to get to someplace, I would think it would be this place as opposed to there, because if you're getting 60% of the calls out there, it just makes sense to be out there. Yeah. Or
Of course, my alter argument is out there, the new construction, you've got all sprinklers, all good, roofs and everything. So your fire suppression is automatically being handled, where if you have a fire in core, that's gonna go up quick.
But as we know, our problem isn't with fires.
No, I know. But
So,
if it is, it's gonna go quickly. The building's gonna go quickly if it's in core.
So do we want to kind of, well, this program was specifically looking at a facility. It wasn't looking at staffing, as Art suggested. Maybe this is a staffing question as much as it's a location. Do we want to make any changes to program 1?
I think it's
Okay.
general enough.
Staffing will be considered.
It has to be, obviously.
Okay. Number two, conduct an analysis to determine the appropriate location, size, and configuration of a police station. So this may be one study that since there's enough synergy between them, you might want to look at both of them together. And then program number three is to update the park master plan every 10 years. So I think we're past that now. I think we were updating the Parks Master Plan for a skate park, and once the skate park got built ahead of the master plan, we never finished the master plan. I think that's what happened. So this says you will have a park master plan in your relatively near future. Okay. Any comments? All right, next one. Implement the beach treatment plant closure, complete all improvements required to route wastewater to the Northwest Treatment Plant. This is happening now. We're studying the linkages. We're figuring out how it's going to happen. It's really a question of when will it be completed, not will it be completed. So just this program says get it done. Conduct an analysis to determine the size and configuration of the courtyard. So again, this is a key facility. Maybe the location and the amount of area is fine. I'm not sure. This is something that really Robin Bore and her public works team need to take on is that corporation yard going to serve the community at build out? Conduct an analysis of future road improvements, sidewalk improvements, bicycle and pedestrian facilities and road maintenance. Candidly reading that feels a little soft to me right now because we do things like CIPs and roadway master plans and pedestrian master plans. So I don't know what 6 gets us that we don't get through more specific efforts, but.
Am I reading that wrong? Is PFS 4, is that beach treatment plan closure or should that be planned? Am I reading?
It should
No,
be
you're reading
planned.
it absolutely right. Thank you. That's the problem with writing things because you know what you
Yeah.
meant to say. So, yeah. So that will be changed to plant.
So I made a note to myself when I was reviewing this about number 5. The verbiage that I was reading through was talking about placing water, a 2 million gallon, whatever water. It said that we have 2 and we need the third one and placing the third one at the courtyard. And living very close to one, they're a huge eyesore and I hate eyesores. The closer to the river we get, the more I hate eyesores. So I guess my question becomes, if we're going to need another facility, is it going to be, and I'm assuming a lot of the a lot of the fresh water is going to be going to Liberty and Trilogy and Bram Ranch and Riverwalk in the future. Those are all at a higher elevation. So is it going to be cheaper to pump water from wells lower down up to keep this stocked? Or is it going to be, or are those wells going to be at a higher level and just let gravity provide the water pressure to get it down to the core? You know, you see what I'm saying? That we're building a tank at 15 or 20 foot sea level and all of those projects are at 50 or 60 foot. And I'd rather put them out there in the south. I'd rather put a tank out there in the South 40 than put it close to the river and be another eyesore. Yes.
I'm not sure why Public Works has identified the courtyard as the location for that tank. It may simply be because we own the ground.
Yeah.
We actually own quite a bit of ground in Rio Vista. So I don't know that that's the driving factor. My understanding of the water system is it is charged and served directly off of these wells. So I don't know that we are relying on. Hey, there she is.
Yeah, I'm zooming, but it wouldn't like go. The reason we're putting the different tanks in different locations, we have one up on Amador already. We have one out at Trilogy, and then, so they should be in like a triangle air, kind of setup so that they feed the water system equally and keep everything pressurized. And that's why we have wells at various locations in the city as well. So as new development comes in, they have to put in new wells. We've lost wells in the core of town. That's why we would put more wells down in the core of town. So it's a system-wide loop kind of thing with the water system, and that's why, and it would be in the back of the courtyard where you really wouldn't see it.
So is what you're saying that the courtyard doesn't need any more property?
If we
For-
take,
For future growth,
right now, we don't believe so.
so we can handle the next 2 phases of houses and still be good with where we are?
Yes.
Okay.
And
With the water tank there.
we're proposing to put the water tank in the back corner, and they may do a lot line adjustment to take a small piece off of, one of the house, where the Poppy House is. To take a small sliver off of that, which is back behind everything, behind the county courtyard, so nobody would ever see it.
So program 5 directs us to analyze the size and configuration of the courtyard. Is that still needed?
Well, that's something that we periodically would do anyway, in case we need to reconfigure it. But I don't think the size needs to be done, egregiously to change. It's not like we need another 5 acres or anything like that. But
Okay.
they've shifted stuff around already, and
So
you
it's
know,
a
in
matter of
5 years
placement.
from now, they may tear one of the buildings down and put some other kind of building there. You know, they have really, really old buildings out there, and then we have the new ones.
So it's just placement is what you're talking about.
There's a lot of room out there.
I only ask because we have a lot of programs in the general plan that we're committing to pursue. If there's any that we don't need to pursue, then it would be prudent to just leave them out.
Yeah, but this is something that periodic review of all
So
of our
you would like
facilities.
that to
we
be
should-
retained?
Yeah,
Great, that's all. I was
it's not a
asking.
detailed analysis that we need to do on a
Okay.
regular basis, but there is periodic times that we need
Great.
to monitor our facilities.
Okay, thanks.
And to go back to Art's question about moving water downhill, we're gonna be moving sewage uphill when we close the plant. So there you
Yes, we
go.
are.
There you have it.
Well, with the placement of the different tanks, you don't really pump water. Right now, we're pumping miles and miles and miles to fill the tanks. All the way from out in the, and it's, the water pressurizes the lines and it just goes. It's not like where the sewage, we have to pump it up.
Mhm.
The water pressure keeps all the lines and pushes it to the tank. So it's not really pushing water uphill.
I was just
Yeah.
making a comment about its visual effect closer to the river as opposed to somewhere that nobody's going to see it, but you assured me that nobody's going to see it. So-
Yeah, the county courtyard's
Right.
going nowhere and it would be back behind that.
Thanks, Robin.
Any other comments on 4, 5, and 6? Okay, next one.
I can take this, Paul, if you want.
Great.
Program PFS 7 is to prepare a study that identifies improvements to automate pumping during storm events, major storm events for the City Hall area and the Edgewater neighborhood. And then establish a priority project list for grant funding every 5 years. So PFS 7 is more geared towards what we've talked about during several meetings in the past, like just kind of looking towards the future in terms of climate impacts to Rio Vista and how to prepare for that.
Yeah, not entirely, because currently it's rather expensive for Robin and her crew to maintain the pumping, which is not automated, as I understand it. So there is currently an expense that this program would address and would help to relieve a currently existing and only a problem that will only get worse as well.
So should we add maybe something in here about a flood wall? Because if we want to eliminate the pumping and we have a flood wall high enough, we won't have to pump, but with sea levels and things rising, we have to consider that too.
It's not the river we're pumping out, it's the stormwater that rolls down to the flood wall. We have to pump it over this flood wall now.
Oh, over, okay.
Edgewater and down here's the low point, so everything runs down here and then we gotta pump it over. So, and the crews are out there, every 2 to 4 hours, making sure everything's pumping and
There's no,
there's no
blockages.
automation to it. I mean, they literally have to manually put the pumps in and when storm season happens and pull them out later.
And then-
The ones behind City Hall are automated, but not the ones on Edgewater.
And then Robin, we we do a grant funding list every 5 years of priority projects for grant funding?
This is our CIP projects that we use. And so this is to memorialize that we would continue to do that and identify our priority projects. Because if they're in our priority list, then we know which grant funds to go after.
Okay, any comments on 7 and 8? Okay, onward. Number 9, AB 1600 analysis. AB 1600 refers to the requirement to study the benefits of impact fees and make sure that they are related to the rate payer. So Robin will probably have something to correct in what I'm about to say, but in essence, we need to justify the fees that we are charging. And that is done through an AB 1600 rate study. My understanding that is currently underway now.
It's not technically underway, but it will be. It's part of the rate studies that we're working on. So that's where we identify all of the infrastructure needs caused by new development. And then we assess the fees accordingly.
Okay, and then number 10 is just, we want to look at those studies every 5 years and either complete new standalone studies or just update the rates accordingly. So we want to keep the fees current because if we're not raising those over time, we can turn around and find out that we've been under collecting for the obligations that we need to meet. Any? Very small library.
it's in this packet, actually. Further in this packet, because I have I have a couple notes on it, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we're still coming up on library, so we'll talk about that in a moment. So 9 and 10, any comments, thoughts? Okay, next. 11, maintain a 5-year capital improvement program. This is really what we've been talking about. The CIP is the process by which we budget for the major capital expenditures, that's construction. And so this just is a statement that we will update on a regular basis, amended and adopted with the city's budget on an annual or biannual basis. Questions, comments? Moving on. Number 12, establish and review the franchise ordinance and regulations to ensure control and leverage and exercise over telecommunications and utilities. Telecommunications and utilities have to ask for the rights to place their facilities in our roadways, and that's what a franchise agreement is. We want to make sure that those franchise agreements are benefiting the community as much as possible. Robin, you want to add anything on franchise agreements? No, okay. So this also states that we'll review the overlap of development standards and regulations, subdivision ordinance. So when we look at development projects, we oftentimes are establishing easements where facilities can be located. So that's part of the subdivision process. And then it states we'll use expert assistance in reviewing contract and franchise proposals in conducting negotiations. So these are agreements between the city and service providers. So that's essentially what the franchise agreements are.
Used to be years ago. Communities seem to have a lot more control than they do today. I was quite surprised at a trilogy that Frontier just basically said, we're not putting underground fires, phone lines out there. Because there's not enough customers buying landlines, and so we think that buy some, we're not gonna put them in. And if you wanna put them in, the shade, put them in, what else is it? You know, it's quite surprised by that position. And because it is quite short-sighted, especially if you factor in that and that. Wondering.
Robin, can we compel providers to install facilities if they have a franchise agreement? Can they simply say, we don't want to?
They can, and the way the industry has, quite frankly, a lot of lobbyists and have enacted a lot of laws. That they are kind of like the railroad in some instances where they can kind of do what they want. Our control is we can charge them a franchise fee to use our right of way. That's pretty much it. They're governed by all of their different stuff. Like PG&E, you know, we can't require them to underground, you know, downtown kind of stuff. You know, they're required to put in utilities because, you know, they're the only provider in town. The telecommunication and cable and all of that kind of stuff is much different than the regular franchise agreements, and with the difference in technology and everybody used to have a landline, and now you don't have to have a landline. And in fact, there are a lot of places where, you know, like during fires, they burn down and AT&T won't put them back. And so, or they're very, very slow about putting them back. And so, and everything is, you know, they keep saying everything's going to cellular, 5G's coming, and they're really planning for the future is really what they're saying. But there's nothing that we can make them.
I suppose could we do anything related to a developer requiring that certain infrastructure be placed? I'm aware of places where it's only because the phone lines are there that you can then get cable TV service because it runs over the
Over their
phone
stuff.
line. Yeah,
You know, but Comcast has now come to town. Before, Frontier was the only one here. And that was the only way you could get a phone line, and now everybody's got cell phones and all of that stuff. So, I mean, when we could do a development agreement, I'm sure that we can negotiate pretty much whatever we're hearing from the residents that they want. But as industry goes, I don't know if making people put in phone lines, if that's really something that's going to happen, as they're not maintaining their backbone in the switchgear and all of that stuff as it is. So it's probably a matter of a short amount of time when there are no more landlines. So
Well.
I know I'm very partial to my landlines too, but
It's not so much a landline for me as there is the technology for fiber, and fiber is actually faster and more reliable than wireless. But if you can't get the company to run the fiber, the time to run the fiber is before you build the building. It's not after you build the building. And so, you know.
but in the last 5 years, Comcast has come to town. When I first came here, Comcast wasn't here.
Right.
And now they're here and they're installing it.
They ran, and they came in, they actually in Trilogy had old fashioned coax cable, and they came in and ran fiber because that was in their business plan, that was in their interest. And so, but I think we ought to, when we're talking to a developer, somehow look at protecting that customer out there. That they're going to have some way of communicating, which is, like I said, I was quite surprised at the position that was taken when it was taken.
Well, when Trilogy was built, that was coax cable was the industry standard.
Yes, yes.
And so now it's wireless and fiber.
Right.
And so,
Yes, so. We kind of got off there, sorry.
Yep. Okay, next slide.
Had a question.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's actually between 12 and 13, because we're talking about contract services. I think 13 is about review and update the franchise agreement with solid waste.
Yes, it is.
We also have a contract service with our wastewater facilities. Should we have something in there about that? Because that needs to be periodically as well.
Robin?
yeah. So our franchise agreement with the trash company is has different rules for the competitive bid process and all of that. We've had the same haulers since 1989. And their contract is good through like 2027. They get the garbage companies get really long contracts. Versus service contracts, they have a maximum of 5 years. And then they're supposed to go out to bid unless there's some clause in there, like ours had a clause that they could extend it for 5 years, and then they extended another 5 years, but we will be going out to bid this time. And it expires December 31st, 2024. And we're planning to go out to RFP probably in January so that we have time enough to transition and all of that.
And are we referring to wastewater treatment plant operators?
Yeah, that's,
Okay. Yeah, so a little bit different in that the solid waste is an entire package. They have the infrastructure, the trucks, everything. So,
and they have long-term contracts, and there isn't a state requirement that you have to go out to contract bid for them in the same way that you do for contract services.
are we
There-
good?
It's because they're providing they're providing a service versus. Well, that's a standard contracting thing, just like, all of our engineers, we go out through a bid every 5 years. They're the same way. So,
Okay. 13, we just touch on this, but solid waste is removed under a franchise agreement by a private company. And we're just saying, let's review it and get the best deal we can for the community. Really is what number 13 is about. Number 14, consult with the school district regarding reserving sites within proposed development. So those of us who have been in the Brand Ranch discussions know that the school district has expressed interest in a school site, but has not fully committed. So we're doing everything we can to make sure a site is available in the event that the district does wish to purchase. Because the developer doesn't give this land away, they make it available, they don't build on it, but then the school district acquires the land. So we're just saying, we'll work with the district, and whatever their guidance is, if they say they need a site, we'll get that site reserved. Number 15 is, really coordinating with a number of agencies. That the school district is one, the county provides library services. There's ways that we can coordinate with these agencies to make sure that we get as much value out of our facilities as possible, so that we're working together instead of at cross purposes. So avoiding duplication, emphasizing sharing of facilities, clustering of facilities where possible. Any thoughts on either of those? Okay, moving on. This is the last programs. Work with the Solano County Airport Land Use Commission to update the land use compatibility plan. I think it's probably a prudent program, but our land use compatibility plan, I believe, was adopted in 2018. That's pretty fresh. I've seen land use compatibility plans that are 20 years old or more. It is possible, particularly if operations at the airport change over the next 22 years, that will open that document up. So this just says, work with the county land use commission, airport land use commission. And 17, review uses of technology to provide better customer service via only information and services. There is something broken in that sentence. I read that this afternoon and said, that's not right. The concept here is that there are ways through technology, electronic plan submittals, electronic billings. There's ways that we can make life easier both for our own staff as well as the outside world requiring services. And we're just saying, let's take advantage of those systems for payment of fees, for submittal of plans, for those services that might currently require somebody to come in and drop off paper. How can we automate that? So we'll work on 17 and correct the language in that. Via online, yeah, that would make sense. So can we blame it on spell check? It was an autocorrect. Okay. Thoughts on these two? Accepting will correct number 17. All right, we can all take a big breath because we just got through the goals, policies, and programs of the public facilities and services element. So next slide. Nick, you want to, sir? Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. Yeah, we'll fix that. So it will always be PFS. Thank you. That's the stuff you stop seeing when you work on it. Okay.
All right, so the preliminary draft land use and community character element, we provided a copy to you back in early May for review and input. That was a Word file. And we ended up taking that, formatting it, and putting it into another application so we could add some photos and maps. So this is probably like a 70% version of the land use element where we just giving you a look, see if that makes sense, if it looks and feels right. We also updated the goals, policy, and implementation program section from your comments, previous feedback that you've provided. And the version you have this evening in your packet, we can provide you a Word file as well. So if you did want to provide some comments or revisions and track those, we can also provide you the Word file. Earlier today, I believe I provided Lisa a Word version of the open space element, which we'll talk about in a moment. So she could make some revisions in there and provide some comments. So just wanted to get your feedback tonight. If you took a look at the land use element, if you had any comments or questions.
Very impressive. And when you put it all together and whoever does the writing, several things, it's so clear and really good flavor of the city across. Pictures are great.
Paul, can you?
Exciting seeing these start to come into their final form, coming into focus. Nick, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Can you repeat that comment? We couldn't hear that.
Judith said you're incredible, Nick.
Oh, thanks, Judith. You're great too.
Basically, just it's beautifully done. It's
Okay.
very easy to read and the photos are great. The feeling of the language is good too.
One of the goals was to get to a much more consolidated and accessible general plan. I've just been working on the safety element this past week, and it was overwhelming. Like 45 pages that repeated itself sometimes 3 and 4 times over. So we're really trying to get down to what is the essence, what's really important here. And that's why we need your input, is to make sure we don't leave off something that's critical. So that's a lot of what we trust you're helping us with. Okay, next slide.
So the open space and conservation element we provided back in June, that was a draft version again in Word, and then we took your feedback and comments that you provided during the last general plan working group meeting. And I believe we received some feedback directly by email that we did incorporate into this next version that we put into this InDesign document with the photos and some maps. We still have some work to do based on some of the research and information we'll receive from our sub-consultant PlaceWorks on the environmental impact report and some of the work that's being done by their subs on some of the different aspects of that chapter. So it's just, again, a version for you to take a look at and provide some feedback as it appears and how it will appear in the general plan.
I think Nick really characterized it well, that we view these as about 80% drafts. So we're narrowing in, but by no means do we consider these in the can and untouchable. In fact, we'll talk in a moment, but we will want you to look at the whole plan as it comes together as a document and look for the gaps. Look for what's slipping through, look for anything that's inconsistent. We want a consistent tone, consistent treatment, and a good comprehensive treatment. And you really start to see that when you have all of the elements in front of you and you can flip back and forth. So let's go ahead and next slide. I'm sorry, did anybody have comments on either the land use or, yes?
Yeah, I have a
Okay.
couple. On page 2-3,
Which element?
this is the land use.
Okay,
It's future land use and development patterns. Didn't we talk about our sphere of influence and possibly going on the other side of the river? Should we mention that in here?
we can. It's,
Should we?
I would suggest no. It's-
Because you don't want to live over there. I got it.
If it was in the same county, I would say absolutely.
I don't think county should stop us, honestly.
Okay,
It doesn't
Um,
stop us with our school districts.
well, we can't have a sphere of influence in an adjoining county. I don't think. Sacramento County LAFCO would have to award that to us. So,
Well, I'm sure you're right, but shouldn't we just include it as a possibility?
okay,
I mean-
so the concept is expansion of Rio Vista to the other side of the river but if we could just leave off terms like sphere of influence for now,
Oh, if that's
study the expansion. So it would take agreement
right.
between Sacramento County and Solano County.
I mean,
And I
Our
think,
fire department does go over there as well, so I don't see how that county thing should really hold us back, but I don't think we should just discount it.
great, we'll probably need to add in at least a program as well as a discussion. So this will probably take the form of an additional paragraph explaining the concept. We may want to have a diagram. We are not limited on what we define as our planning area. And so that may be appropriate to show a planning area that extends over, because that's really something we can draw it, down out to San Francisco if we want. It doesn't have legal standing, but
Okay.
it just says we're looking.
Right. Also in land use on page 2-6 or item 2-6, second paragraph, it says bounded by Logan Street, South Front. Should it just be Front Street? Because South Front is this way and North Front is that way. So should we just forget South and just put Front Street?
I was
Or
getting,
put North and South instead of
okay.
just South?
Okay, and what page is that on?
This is 2-6.
And the problem is we're citing only South Front and therefore excluding North Front.
Mhm.
Okay, I think probably the correct way to do it would be North Front Street and South Front
North
Street,
and
since
South Front
those are the names.
Okay. Then the next thing I have is in the land use, 2-10. It shows two photos. Can we get the bottom photo switched to something in Rio Vista?
Sure.
Okay,
That's, we are, right now, the photos are plugged.
Right.
Our graphics guy has been going on the internet and grabbing photos.
okay.
So.
So can you grab one of ours?
But that's something we're going to really want to look at closely before we get out of this. You know, we do want to have that look and make sure all photos are appropriate. So
Right.
which 2-10, is there a
Yeah,
particular?
2-10. That's the lower left-hand photo.
You know, that, I have to go back to that. That may have been intentional, just to provide an example of what that use could look like. So we'll go back to it, but maybe we should put some captions if it is, you know, a picture of an outside, you know, example community or something.
Well, we do have some pictures here that you could take, like the old theater. There is
Okay,
residence above and commercial below. And
Okay.
then also with the building to the right of it too, so.
oh, sure.
Great.
Let's see. It talks about, this is 2-17, an architectural style. Do we actually have one? And if it is, what is it?
20th century eclectic.
20th century eclectic. Okay,
Actually had a conversation to that effect today that we have buildings from the 20s, we have buildings from the 40s, we have buildings from the 60s.
Mhm.
So it is quite a mix. I think that there is a character that we're kind of striving for, which is, for lack of a better term, earlier 19th century small town. That kind of is the feel I would say that Rio Vista has for me. But I can't say that it's any particular architectural style. So what's the thought on that reference, that we just don't have a single architectural style?
I'm fine with eclectic style personally, but I don't think we can characterize everything as one type of style. I don't know how you guys feel, but. Yeah,
Yeah. Great. We'll adjust language.
okay. And then on the next page, 2-18. It talks about annexing land. Where are we gonna do that when we're already landlocked?
There was some question about the land that is south of Brand Ranch on Highway 12. We've looked at that as a study area.
Okay,
We also have some sphere of influence that extends out towards past the beach treatment plant to the regional park and beyond. That's in our sphere of influence. I'm not sure if that's all owned by the group or not, Flannery.
it just seemed kind of odd to me that we would annex land when we're almost totally landlocked. Just my,
I think there was still some question about exactly how much Flannery owns out and around Brand Ranch and then kind of west of Liberty.
Okay.
That would be the one area that we did include as a study area. It's not in our sphere of influence, but it's identified as a study area in the general plan.
okay. Then on the next page, 7.1, we've got a really nice picture, but it's our old dock. Can we get it replaced with a new dock?
Page again?
7.1. The open space introduction.
And so is the dock no longer there, or?
No, it's been replaced.
Okay.
Then on page 7-11, it talks about the waterfront, and it talks about an 8-acre area bounded by Highway 12 on the north, Front Street on the west, and Main Street on the south. Can we just say promenade?
Sure. What does the promenade mean to everybody? I guess
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so there's the park, there's the improved area. I've walked on that. It's beautiful. Is that the promenade? Is the
Mhm.
promenade something bigger?
It's hopefully will be bigger, but it's pretty much it right
Because
now.
the 8 acres is that plus the vacant land. That's the potential to expand. Promenade and adjoining lands. Something, because
Sure.
it's more than just the promenade.
Right. Okay. Then I have just a couple housekeeping things back from the beginning and attachment A, page 4 of 13. We talk about, it's under law enforcement, we talk about the police department with 12 sworn officers. That's kind of deceiving because we really only have 2 to 3 on as a shift. So when you say 12 officers, it almost sounds like we've got 12 officers all the time. And maybe we should state in there that we have actually 2 to 3 per shift. That would add up to the 12.
Okay, I think I simplified that down because I did receive the whole, this is our staffing model. So I can expand on that.
Yeah,
So-
because 20 years from now, they're gonna think we had 12 officers all the time, at least from the way I'm
Yeah.
reading it, so.
And 12 officers gives you your free officer coverage
Mhm.
24/7.
Right.
So,
Okay.
um,
And then on page 5 of 13, it talks about, is it staffing, it's also staffing levels. It says the current staff of 9 sworn officers. It should really be 12 at that point. I don't know where the 9 came from.
What page is that on?
5 of 13. The last paragraph before fire protection services.
And there it mentions.
It mentions 9, a staff of 9.
Yeah, what that's reflecting is the 9 sworn officers and then the captains are in addition and the chiefs in addition.
Okay, well then
Yeah.
say
so
that, I
that's-
guess, if that's,
yeah.
if that's what you mean.
But it's inconsistent with
Yeah.
the earlier, yeah, because I think the captains and chief are also sworn officers. so-
Yes, they are. And,
but yeah,
and the, continuing on that paragraph, it says if residence is projected to result in 15 sworn officers,
Mhm.
again, so are we talking 15 as opposed to 9 or 15 as opposed to 12?
Or
it's
did you
actually
add 12 and
15 as
3?
opposed to 12.
So.
Yeah.
The first
So-
part of the paragraph.
So
you're
we
talking-
need to be consistent,
Yes,
so, okay. Yeah, the chief said 3 additional officers would do wonders for his coverage, and at that point, covering the city of build out would be not a problem.
Then on page 9 of 13, the very first paragraph, it talks about the library, which Art talked about at being 5,300 square feet, and we probably says we probably should have one of 15,000 square feet, but I'm guessing the way things are going in our life that having a larger library isn't going to be necessary because everything's kind of going digital.
Actually, that's a misnomer, because the function of the library is changing, but the size isn't really changing.
Okay,
So instead of stacks, you have private study rooms and you have meeting rooms. So it becomes more of a social setting rather than a place that books are stored.
okay. So then with that being said, can we get some numbers from the library to find out how many people are going there per month or per week? I mean, that might help this paragraph a little bit.
They may well have provided that. The library gave us a lot of data. In the interest of, not having an overwhelming report, we distilled down, so.
Okay.
The library does feel like 15,000 square feet is the minimum footprint to build a building. They actually think we should have a 20,000 square foot facility.
I want my store bigger too, but does it make
Yeah.
sense? You know?
I want my garage bigger.
Yeah,
My
there you
wife
go.
wants her kitchen bigger.
That's not even a 25-year-old building, is it? I mean,
Mm-mm.
it's a pretty modern building.
that
It was
was
rebuilt in,
1990. I didn't-
yeah,
it's
something
around
like
that.
that after the.
It
the
burned
original
down and then there
burn.
was a rebuild.
Yeah, after 90, in there.
Yeah, it's undersized and has some minor issues to be dealt with. I don't I don't know that it's a matter of
Yeah, staffing.
abandoning that facility, but maybe probably building a second, because it is quite removed from our population center again. So if there was a satellite facility, but as we talked about right at the beginning, I think the building is the city's responsibility. So we would have to deliver land in a building. The library would then have to outfit it with whatever that means, whether it's meeting rooms, study rooms, stacks, books, whatever. But that would be a capital outlay of the city. So, there, of course, we would like a big, beautiful new library. We'd like a lot of things.
And my last one is on page 13 of 13. Should we mention the landfill in here as part of a possible park or development or something? Because we don't really touch on the landfill in any of this.
Yes, we should, since we know it's a potential site. Yeah, and this is I'm sorry, what element were we?
Well, this is page 13 of 13. This is under programs, but I just tabbed it
Okay,
there. I don't know if
yeah.
it necessarily belongs there, but it came to my mind.
Yeah, let me take a look at that, because that's actually a very viable solution. Financially, it actually makes sense to reclaim the landfill as parkland. Surprisingly, it's wonderful that the economics actually work. So. Thank you for the comments.
Okay, now I have a couple. Never to be one short for words. First thing is we've not here, but in general have been having discussions about branding the city. We've been talking about city branding for years. And we need, I just see the need total increasing exponentially because we're sitting here on the eastern edge of Solano County, and you touched on it a few minutes ago about, thinking about going across the river is difficult because it's a different county. But really, so much of our life is affected by the Sacramento River and the Delta. And I find we have some unique opportunities. I don't know how many, most people where we live, we are represented by one congressperson or one assembly person, so on and so forth. There are 4 or 5 different Congress people, different assembly people, different state senators that touch Rio Vista and the Delta. When you lump Rio Vista and the Delta, and we say we are the gateway to the Delta, lump us together, we've got a huge group that we could be reaching out to. And I think we need to start thinking in a broader terms, because I really feel often when we think we are part of Solano County and we want something from Solano County, we're the country bumpkin who walks 30 miles into Fairfield with hat in hand saying, please, sir, give me $5. And I have a real problem with that, because I think we're worth a whole lot more than that. And I think a lot of it has to do with branding and looking at our future. And whether that's part of the general plan or not, I don't know. But how do we start making that happen now rather than later? Is my question. So that's number one. Number two, another thing near and dear, and I'm going to surprise a lot of people with this, and that's public art. I don't see a lot of mention to public art in any of the elements that we've touched so far. And we have got to start thinking of ourselves as a place that is reaching out to a much broader population to say, hey, come here and see what we have to offer. And how do we set ourselves apart by doing that? I think public art is one way.
And I mentioned to Nick just today that our land use and community character element is strong on land use and not as strong on community character. I think that public art is a good aspect of something that creates character, so I think that will fit well in there.
And land use, and I may have missed it, but again, one of my favorite places in this little town as potential future growth is the old army base that has been sitting there unused.
That's the South Study area, sir.
I just want to make
No,
sure
wait,
that
wait, it's the South Riverfront.
my concern is I don't want it to go away for some short-term gain when that really could provide a lot of opportunity for the future of Rio Vista and the Delta in recreation and events and so on and so forth. And I don't want to pay today's debt at the expense of future generations with that.
There certainly was dialogue about the reuse of the Army base site some years ago. And there's some agencies that have interest and expectations on the property. We're going to be updating the council on that relatively soon. We're trying to get an understanding from both state and federal agencies about their expectations. But I think we're going to have to hear from the city council about what your expectations are. Because the discussions that everybody's operating on are rather old and not reflective of any elected officials today, I think.
In regard to the Army base, our Congressman Mike Thompson was really efficient in being able to clear up Mare Island as far as all the toxins and the lead and stuff. And I think he's pushing something forward for the Army base here. So I think once that happens, we'll be able to use the land a lot. We'll be able to do something with the land as opposed to having to remediate all of that, what's going on there. So if that can happen, I think that'll push an Army base, if that's what we're still calling it, that kind of project forward.
Well, I think I've mentioned in one of our previous meetings, I prefer recreation and event center to Army, the old Army base, but
Nobody knows what you're talking about, though.
We actually have renamed it the South Riverfront for the general plan. So we'll see if that actually ever catches. But maybe that's not the name we'll ultimately apply to it, but we're trying to move away from something that's not there anymore. And the remediation has been a huge challenge. So
Yeah.
if we could get some help there, that would be great.
I believe he's working on it, so.
Okay, anything else on the elements that we provided to you, land use and open space? And anybody who would like Word versions of these so that you can do track changes, that's great. It's really easy. It's an easy way for us to incorporate your revisions. All right, now we're just about done. Want to talk about what we have coming in the next few months. On the 7th, we'll be presenting to you the introduction to the general plan. So this really provides the context of planning in Rio Vista, as well as an introduction to the general plan. So that it'll be your first look at that. You'll receive a complete noise section. We have a safety and noise element. Noise being half of that element, you'll have a complete noise section, goals, policies, and programs, as well as all the contextual discussion. You'll also be receiving goals, policies, and programs for mobility and for safety. That's a lot, and we'll see how far we get. We're going to get all those materials to you. Public facilities and services was one of the more complex elements in the entire general plan. We were able to get through it, but we'll be looking at 2 elements worth of goals, policies, and programs, plus the introduction. We'll get those to you. We'll get the introduction and the noise section 2 weeks in advance, so you'll have some additional time to review. And then we'll get the goals, policies, and programs for mobility and safety to you a week in advance, so you can have a little more time to review the materials. Next slide. Then on the 5th, we'll come back with a first complete draft of the safety element. And our goal is that we'll have economic development goals, policies, and programs. I know that there's interest in understanding what the economic development strategy is in context with the economic development element. There certainly is a relationship, but the strategy is much more detailed. The element is higher level. I understand that it will be about 30 to 45 days before a version will be made available to the council of the economic development strategy. So then you'll be able to start seeing how these two things are working together. But we'd like to get those economic development goals, policies, and programs to you in October. Then there's a subject referred to as environmental justice. Whenever a city updates more than 2 elements of their general plan, they must address environmental justice. And that means that we have to look to any areas with census tracts with disadvantaged communities. We are in one census tract, and it is defined as having aspects of a disadvantaged community. And that's largely based on income levels, but there's other metrics that lead to that. That means that we need to address environmental justice. And so some cities, obviously big cities, you see the factories and the railroad lines, then you see the disadvantaged homes right next to them. And then the nice homes are up on the hill with fresh air and clean water. Not really applicable to Rio Vista, but we do want to address any inequities, environmental justice issues, and we'll do that throughout the general plan. So there's going to be statements throughout the general plan addressing environmental justice. There won't be an environmental justice element per se, but we'll be bringing those changes in. So what that's going to look like is probably changes to elements that you've already reviewed. We'll bring in the additions that address environmental justice. Make sense? Okay, next slide. November, we'll come in with our first complete draft of economic development and our first complete draft of mobility. At that point, you will have seen a complete first cut general plan. All of the sections will be in front of you. So we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. Following that, our goal is to put that together into a consolidated binder, because at some point it's just too hard to go from one file to another, and you're going to just want paper that you can write on and start cross-checking and put stickies on and all that. So we'll be getting you a binder with all of the elements, and in December we'll begin to look at the first complete draft, the collection of all these elements. Some of those will be formatted like the land use and open space that you saw today. Some may still be in Word document, but you'll at least have essentially a general plan in your hands. And we'll start looking at that as a complete document and think about how we're going to daylight that to the community, how we're going to establish the path towards eventual adoption, which will be happening in early 2024. So we got a lot ahead of us, coming pretty fast now. Chair, I'm through.
Yeah, you've got here housing element status. Did we get anything back yet?
We have turned the housing element as adopted by the council into HCD, and they, by statute, have 60 days to respond. We've been told that staff at HCD is committed to responding more quickly, and that will come in the form of a letter stating compliance. And so we're hoping that within the next couple of weeks, we'll get that letter and we'll know that we're officially done with the housing element.
Okay. Anybody else have anything before we go? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks much.